Hey guys, quick heads up before I start the video. The link down below takes you to my Patreon, where you can download the project files for this video. Also gain access to my premium tutorials and in-depth courses where we build games together from start to finish. Check out my Patreon below, gain direct access to years of experience so that you can start working on your dream game tomorrow. Hello guys, welcome back to a new video for my multiplayer Bean Battle Royale tutorial series. So in the last episode we set up the health bar widget. We actually created the whole widget. We also corrected a couple of things. So for example, the counter on the top right, whenever we now actually go ahead and enter the match, instead of displaying 2 of 2 players, it will then just display 2 survivors. We also made sure that the characters are always relevant so that they can still see each other at great distances. So right now we see 2 survivors. We can then jump out. And then the client can go over here. Like I said, we also worked on the relevancy so that they can still see each other at great distances. So even if we were to let this airplane go all the way to the end here, and then have this server bean jump out, we can still see the server bean. As you see right now, you can also see him actually on the airplane. So even though he's way beyond the 150 meter culling distance, we can still see the character, which is important in the Battle Royale, because you should be able to snipe players across these huge maps. So right now we're going to jump out, and then if we do the parachute, then very small, you can still see me parachuting all the way off there in the distance. So, okay, and then we basically set up the health bar widget, which now displays 100 out of 100 health. And then what we are going to be working on next in this video is making the actual logic so that the characters can get damage. So let's just get started right away. So to do this, first of all, I want to make a little utility folder. So we're going to click on blueprints, new, and let's call it utility. And then inside of here, we're going to be putting some actors with which we can easily test things, such as, for example, the damage that we're going to be working on right now. So inside of the utility folder, we're going to right click, make a blueprint class of the actor type, and we're going to call this BP, let's call it damaging or damage actor. So this one is just going to be like a little collision box that if the players run into it, they will actually receive some damage. So to do that, we're going to open this guy up, go to the event graph, and then, yeah, let's leave that for what it is. But also, we see that if we hit play here, that the game automatically starts unless we hit play, test it with 1 player. So in order to test, we can either test here properly with 1 player, and we would have all the time that we need before getting put into an airplane. Or we can also just go to the testing level that we had from a previous video. And then inside of the testing level, we can simply assign the core game mode here. Or we could also, as I said in the first video as well, we could also just make a specific child game mode. So we could basically make new children and put that inside of a testing folder. And that way we can basically make sure that the gameplay logic is not running so that we are not going to be spawned inside of an airplane. But right now the core class is fine because all we need to use is the character here and then this core player controller. Let's see if that differentiates. No, so we do need to start using this player controller as this one already contains logic to set up our gameplay UI. So we will actually right now here make a folder and call it testing. This will be our testing game mode, and we're going to make it a combination of this player controller, this character, this game mode, this game state. So first of all, the core characters, what we're going to be duplicating here, let's call it BP test character, and then we're going to drag it into the test folder. Now the core game mode, we're going to duplicate that as well, and let's just call it test GM. And let's put this one into the testing folder as well. This game state is what we want to use. So we're going to call it test game state. Put it in here too. But then for the player controller, we do want to use the gameplay PC. So this is going to be the test PC, because that already creates our widgets that we want. So now we're going to click save, and there we go. And then over here in the level, we obviously need to assign the test game mode. And then if we hit play, we see that we have a character without any of the UI. So how come? Well, we set up the game mode here, but we still need to obviously assign these classes to that game mode. So right here, we're going to select our test character, this guy, Then for the game state, we're just going to drag it in like this, and the player controller, drag it in as well. Then if we hit play, we see that we indeed still have all of the UI, but that there's no thing like trying to spawn us inside of the airplane. So that is fine. Now that we got this, we're going to be working on that utility actor that can damage us. So in here, we're going to click on the viewport, click on add, and get ourselves a collision box. So here we go. Then by default, if you drag this into the world like this, then if you hit play, you won't be able to see it. So if we now hit play, let's put it full screen, then we don't see it. But for testing purposes, we do want to have this one be visible. So with the box selected, we can set hidden in game off so that we can see it in the game. And we can also adjust the line thickness to, let's say 2, so that it's better visible basically. And then the default scale, let's set that to something like 2 as well, because it was a pretty small box right now. Then what we want this box to do is that we can actually make it the default scene root. Hit compile and save. And then with the box selected, we can scroll down here and we will see a couple of events. So the first event that we want to use here is on begin overlap. So what do we want to do on overlap? Well, we want to damage the actor that is overlapping. So basically Unreal Engine already has a function for that. So if you right click here, we can type in apply damage. And there we go. And then we see that this only runs on the server. That's what this that's what this icon here specifies. So what we're going to do to ensure that it only runs on the server and that we won't be wasting logic is that we're just going to drag out of here, type in switch authority, switch has authority, and then plug this one in here. So what do we do right now? If something overlaps, then this volume will just try to damage it. We only need to do that on the server. So on the client, these boxes will also exist inside of the world, and the client will also be able to see these boxes, but we only want the server to actually deal that damage. So on the server, we're going to actually do something with it. And what are we going to do? The other actor is going to be the actor that will be damaged. And then the damage amount, we're going to drag off here, promote it to variable. And let's just call this damage amount. And then if we hit the little I here, then we can adjust this in the world. So if we then do compile save, set the default damage of, let's say 10, then there we go. Now the damage instigator, we could say hook up like an instigator here, but we don't need to set that up for this. And the damage causer is going to be ourself. So this is the actor that does the damage basically. So now that we do that, we basically made this actor so that it can apply damage to any other actor that would implement the damage events. So how do we implement the damage events so that our character can actually start to respond to that? Well, if we then head over to the core character here, so anywhere here in the graph, we can just right click and type in damage. And then if you scroll up, you'll see these damage events. So we want the event any damage. And this is basically the response event. Then as we see, yet again, that executes only on the server. So that's why the server icon is there. So this will run on the server and not on any client. So if you want to basically replicate this down to the clients, then you're going to have to use replication, or you're going to have to use multicast events or running on the owning client. So if you want to do like sound effects, so let's say your bean gets shot and starts to do a sound effect that it sounds like it's hurt, then basically you're going to have to multicast that off of here since we are on the server right now. So what do we have now? The damaging actor, if we walk into it, it damages with an amount, let's say 10. But then here in the world, I can select the damaging actor and set this damage to be way higher, so like 20 or 25. I see that the lines are still a little bit thin. So if we select this guy, let's just make it like 4. And then make the default, let's make it 5. Because it's a pretty small box right now. There we go. That's a bit better, easier to work with. So yeah, this guy sends the damage through using this default Unreal Engine event, and then here the damage comes through. So any actor that you would implement this event on can in that case then get damaged. So it will automatically interface to any actor and not to, and it does that by basically plugging in this over here. So even if you would have like, let's say a squirrel, NPC squirrel running around in your game, then if the squirrel would be the other actor, would just be plugged in here. Now, if on the squirrel you would have installed this event any damage, then yes, even the squirrel would do something over here. So what do we want to do over here? Well, we basically just want to get our health. And then we want to subtract out of here. So we're going to do a minus and subtract. So the damage will be out of here. And then we can say that we can clamp this. So we type in clamp float. Then the maximum value is our max health and the minimum value is 0. So what do we do here? We basically make sure that we cannot go below 0 health. That's why we clamp the outcome. Because it might be the case that you are at 10 health and that you get 30 damage by a headshot, but then still we don't want to go below this. So first of all, we want to basically then set this. And there we go. And now we do see that previously we set this to be a rep notify variable so that we have the opportunity to code something here. And then what we can also do is, instead of doing the multicast off of here to do cosmetic sounds or to do blood splatter, is that we can also do that in here. So here we could also handle sounds or blood splatter, since rep notifies also handle on, basically on the server and on all the clients. And rep notifies are more preferred than RPCs. You can read that in the Unreal Engine documentation. Check out Cactus Center right now on Steam and Early Access. It's a very fun multiplayer video game, cheaper than the Starbucks coffee. So if you want to have a good time with your friends or strangers, click that link down below, and I appreciate every single one of you, and enjoy the rest of the video. Bye! So wherever you can use rep notifies instead of RPCs, it is recommended to do so, as they are more optimized for the server performance. But here we go. So we now basically set it. Right now I'm not gonna use anything from the rep notify, so I'm actually gonna switch it to replicate it, and then also delete its rep notify function over here. Hit compile and save. And let's go ahead and give this a little test. So I got 100 health. If I then run into here, then I got 90 health. Then I run into here again, 80, 70, 60, etc. And that's automatically replicated and properly working. So also if I do 2 players, listen server, hit play, then I get my 2 characters. I put my server on the right, client on the left. So the client can run in here and it can also receive the damage. And then the server can run in here and also receive the damage. So what are we going to use this damage event for? Well, later on in the series, not that long actually from now, we're going to be having guns, and then players can shoot each other, and that will also go over this interface event. So the gun will basically do a line trace, shoot a line, try to see if you actually hit another player, and then apply the damage using this event, or more basically interface function over here. And then in the character, what we want to do here is, if the character is dead, we obviously just want to make the character disappear. So what we are going to do right now is, if the health, so we're going to drag off of here and say if it is less or equal than 0, which means dead, then we're going to basically say that we are dead. So in that case, we're going to destroy the actor. And then if we go ahead and test this out, then what we see here is, if the client here is standing here and the server here, then the server will basically run. So yeah, we've got to do this a couple times. And then this is the final hit. So here we go, boom, and the server is dead. And then the client here can do the same. And then the client is dead. So that's great. That's how we can kill people. But now that we can kill people, we also want to go back into our actual level. So let's go back into our Battle Royale. And then we need to make sure that all of our widgets work properly and get updated as well. So what we're going to do here is, in the case that people die, we want to basically subtract the amount of current players. So what are we going to do? We're going to fly over to our Battle Royale level. And then somewhere here, we're going to drop the players, and then we're going to put our utility box into the world here. But this time, let's make it do 50 damage per hit. Otherwise, I'm going to have to run through it so many times. And then what's the test going to be here? Well, in the top right corner, we see 2 out of 2 players. Once we actually start dropping out of the air, it will say 2 survivors. So now we want to see if that number will actually go down if we hit that. So if we go ahead to the widget and then open up our player count, then we can basically go to the event graph, go to the function here, get player amount text. So what is the logic right now? If the match has started, then we can basically say we got the current amount of players is the number of survivors. So apparently we are reading from the current amount of players variable that exists inside of the gameplay game state. So to change the gameplay game state variable, every time that the player is going to die, we're going to have to basically decrease that. So here we got the gameplay game state. So if we open that guy up, then we see this variable over here, current amount of players, and apparently it just gets set whenever the players are connecting here, and that's it. So after that point, we're basically gonna want to subtract an amount of players. So to do that, we can then drag in the current amount of players, and we're going to be setting it here. So how are we going to set this amount of players, and how are we going to have this amount of players communicated down to the client? Well, the client basically already knows. If we check inside of the player count widget here, it's basically already bound, so it will just keep reading the most up-to-date data. So all we're going to have to do right now is basically subtract players from here whenever they die. So to do that, we could either just make a custom event here and then communicate using a custom event to this blueprint. So that would look something like this. Custom event, and then player died. We could call it something like that. So each time a player would die, we would basically subtract 1, and then that we would set as the new value. So we could basically just call this actual event here. So back inside of the character, we know that we are already on the server. So before we destroy the character, we can basically do get GameState. And then we can cast to our gameplay game state. And then out of here would be that event player died. So this would work. And then we could hook this all up and have our logic be like this. But what we can also do is that we can use an interface event so that we don't have to cast like this. And that's what I prefer. It keeps everything a bit cleaner. So to do that, we're going to go into our interface folder, and we see that we already set up an interface for the game state previously. So if we open this one up, then we can basically add a function here, and let's call this notify player def. And we're also gonna put this under the well, not match flow, we're gonna put this under, let's say, let's call this something like the match state. Something like that. So we're going to notify the player that. Then we're going to hit compile and save. And then what we see inside of the game state here, if we open up then the interfaces and then under match state, we then can double click this interface event or function, and then we can hook it up like this. So now this comes from an interface, and then we can select it all, hit C, and let's put a comment around it. Decrease the amount of survivors. Let's just call it that. So how can we communicate to this interface event? Well, back inside of the character, interfaces are easier and more clean to use because casts, they got all of these nodes, right? Cast failed, cast succeed, then you have to cast specifically, and then you cast to a specific event. You can then double click the event and it will take you there. With interfaces, you cannot do that, but interfaces are more easy because right now we can simply type in this name, notify player dev. So if we drag off of the game state, we can type in notify player dev, and then we see the message here. So we click that, and this is all what it looks like for an interface event. So if we do this one over here, then this is it. And then after we notified the game state, we want the player to actually destroy itself and thus die. So now if we hit compile and save, then we can go ahead and test this out. So we got 2 players here, and my 2 beans are in the airplane. So now we need to get these 2 guys to the middle of the map there. So let's position them so we can jump out. This one can jump on the right, perhaps. Yeah, so I'm gonna just jump, and then I'm gonna use a little bit of my parachute. And let go. Okay, there we go. Now we want this guy to jump out. And a little bit of my parachute. And voila. Okay, so I did put the box a little bit high. I hope we can hit it. So first we're gonna have the server die. So on the top right, it now says 2 survivors. So if I just jump in and then jump in again, boom, then it says 1 survivor, and the guy actually destroys himself. Then this guy's gonna do the same. So 1 and 2. And there we go. And then we see that now it does not subtract a survivor. So why did it not do it for the client? Well, let's have a little look here. Yeah, so we just made one big oopsie here. We basically set minimum player amount, but obviously this variable needs to be the current amount of players. So we made a big oopsie. This needs to be this variable. There we go. That makes more sense, of course, right, guys? So now we hit compile and save. Sorry about that, but this is basically what it needs to look like. So the current amount of players get subtracted, and then we get this. So let's try it again. Okay, so let's try that once more, now that we used the correct variable. So we're gonna jump in here, we see one survivor left, and then jump in here, and jump in here. And then we see 0 survivors left. So typically you don't have 0 survivors left, you have 1, and at that point you would then basically see that, well, you would see who the winner is, but this is just to showcase that we can now get damage and that we can then communicate that people are dying to the game state. Okay, so that's nice. So now we know that we can basically kill people. And then if people die, we can communicate to the game state to see that there's actual less people in the game. So next up, we see if people die, they still got all of their heads up display. They still got all of their UI. So what we want to do is that we actually want to remove that UI as soon as a player dies. So for that, what we can do is that we can go to our gameplay player controller here. And then inside of the gameplay player controller, we can remove these events. We could code something called unpossess. Event unpossess, and this basically gets called whenever we lose control or unpossess a pawn. So in the case that our pawn gets unpossessed, we can then basically say, okay, that means that we died in this case in our specific game. So in that case, we can remove the gameplay HUD. So we can then get the gameplay HUD here and say remove from parent. There we go. We can then hook this up, hit compile, save. And there we go. Then if we hit play again, test it out once more. So there's the spot. Let's hop out, parachute a little bit, and here. Then we go to this guy, hop out, just jump straight down, parachute a little bit, and there we go. So the server kills itself, boom, boom. It gets destroyed and removes its UI. And now the client here, where's the thing? Here it is. So now the client jumps in, boom, boom, removes its UI. All right, so that's very nice. So there's now a lot of things that we need to start working on in our game. So first of all, well, we see that we get this little error here. It says access none trying to read property widget blueprint HUD. So yeah, basically what that means is if we go over, we can actually click it here. What we didn't do is that we need to basically right click, validate and hook this up. Now, why do we need to do this? Well, what we see here is that we create this widget here and that basically, so we create the widget here on the local player only. So the server only has it for themselves and then the client only has it for themselves. But this event, unpossess, basically fires on the server and the clients. So for the server basically properly removed its own parent here. But then when the client unpossessed, then the client fired this event and tried to remove its own parent, and it did successfully. But then the server also tried to remove the widget for the client, which it can't because the server never created the widget for the client. So it was removing an invalid widget. It was basically just trying to get from this variable, which was set to none. And that means access node none, which we can read here inside of the error. Access none, trying to read property, widget blueprint HUD. So that's what's going on. So if you just validate it and then the server runs this, then we know that it works properly. And yes, for you guys that are smart out there, we can obviously also put this in here to ensure that only the local player will do it. And since we know that the local player has this reference set to a valid reference, we could then also simply just drag it in like this and remove this and hook it up like this. So you can do that however you like. I prefer this method of just validating it quickly and then everything is correct and you get no errors. All right, but now we do see that we need to start adding a lot of stuff to our game. So first of all, obviously we want to be starting to looting. We also want to get like the ability to actually start shooting. We need to have like different types of guns perhaps and ammo, stuff like that. We want the whole zone, right? The actual Battle Royale zone to be able to come in. We want perhaps a kill feed. So if players start dying, we want a little kill feed so we can see what's going on in the match. When we die, we are now just static at that location where we died. So when we die, we might want to become a spectator. So it's becoming a whole big list right now of things that we want to do. We also might want to be able to pick up health packs, because in this project I added these little health packs here. So there's a lot on the list right now, and I'm not sure exactly where we should now continue, but let's see, guys. I mean, leave it down in the comments what you guys would want to see next, and then I can actually start working on that. I think it would be nice right now at this point. It would make sense if we would start to implement a little kill feed. And then after the kill feed, I think we could start doing something like spectating. And after that, we can then basically start working on if there's one survivor, that then you obviously have to say, this is the winner of the match. So we have to work on some match flow logic. And then after that, we might finally start to add some guns, I guess. I think that's the kind of road that we're going to go down. But leave it down in the comments what you guys want to see next. If you enjoyed this episode, then please give it a like and subscribe. And be sure to check it out on the Patreon, where you can download the full project file and mess with it yourself. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!